All right, part 4 of the vinyl collection review as of December 2021. We're going to start with a newer release from a band that I haven't heard a bunch of people talk about. I learned about these guys from the Thralls of Metal, um, and that is Terminal Nation, Holocene Extinction. Definitely a band that kind of mixes a lot of. It's a mixture of hardcore and death metal in a way that's not deathcore. It's in my opinion, the good way that it's mixed, where there's a lot of D beats, a lot of gang vocals from hardcore side, but the death metal stuff is still in there. I just think this is a really well written album in that vein. It almost also has a little bit of like power violence. Um, I feel like Nails, in a way, influenced these guys. I don't have any Nails, but they're a sick band. But um, yeah, this album, Terminal Nation, Holocene Extinction. If you haven't heard of this and you like bands like Nails or Gatecreeper, we'll be getting to them soon. You will like this album. It's good stuff. All right, I think this is the last of my pop albums, but this is Maggie Rogers. Heard it in a past life. My partner really likes Maggie Rogers, so we got the vinyl. I actually, as far as pop, acts recently are concerned, this one's a pretty good one. A lot of thought-provoking lyrics and good songwriting on this one. So I don't mind putting it on once in a while, and it's a good album. Maggie Rogers, if you like that kind of stuff. I don't even know what I would compare it to because I'm just so out of the loop of what like pop bands. But I would say this is more. She's definitely actually singing on this one. It's not all a bunch of computers or whispering. Good vocal performance by Maggie Rogers. All right. Big one coming up. Morbid Angel, Altars of Madness. This is the only Morbid Angel album I have right now, although I am looking to get more. It's kind of funny. I was talking about Trench Rot in the first video and how they got me into Bolt Thrower kind of retroactively, even though they were really inspired by Bolt Thrower. I would say bands like Blood Incantation and Skeletal Remains that I got into recently got me way more into looking at their Bible, which is Morbid Angel. And it just was one of those things that took me a while to get into, but now I'm all into Morbid Angel right now. Altars of Madness definitely falls kind of on its own in the Morbid Angel catalog because it's definitely still that Slayer late 80s thrash metal thing, which I already said that I really enjoy in death metal. So this is just a killer album, but just the way that they orchestrated this thing, then I will say orchestrate because Trey Azagothoth, I still don't really know how to say it. He was way into kind of classical music, which comes out a little bit more in Blessed Are the Sick, the next album. But Altars of Madness, one of the best death metal albums of all time. I think people call it overrated because it doesn't really go where they would go later with like Blessed Are the Sick, Covenant, and then in the Steve Tucker era with like Gateways to Annihilation, because that's like real death metal. Not saying this isn't real death metal, but some people would say that there's too much Slayer on this. I think that's full of crap. This is death metal. This is one of the best albums of all time, and I think it deserves it. If there's anything to knock, it's that David Vincent's voice is a little raspy since he was still smoking at the time. He wouldn't get into the big deep stuff like he would do on Covenant until afterwards. But I would say that as far as debut albums are concerned, this is a total win. I think this is one of the best metal debut albums of all time. I can't even think of any others that really compete with it at the top of my head. This one could, though, but it's not metal. Enter the Wu-Tang, the 36 Chambers, Wu-Tang Clan. Wow. I don't have a lot of hip-hop albums in here. I think this might be the only vinyl, but I have some CDs. But wow, this album, talk about kind of coming off of Altars of Madness. This is just such a good debut album. just with all the guys there. I mean, Ghostface Killa, the RZA, Old Dirty Bastard. I mean, those guys were firing on all cylinders and all 36 chambers, if you will. Man, I mean, there's so many um, good songs on this one with like Cream, Protect Your Neck, Bring to Ruckus. I mean, these are just classic hip hop songs. Anyone who even is casually into hip hop could like this album because it's just so energetic. I mean, when you listen to this, there's a different thing going on every single time. I give it a lot of credit. So one of my favorite hip hop albums, one of the best albums of all time, Enter the Wu-Tang, the 36 Chambers. Wow, wait. This is very serendipitous because this is also one of the best debut albums of all time, but it's not metal and it's not hip hop. It's Boston, self-titled release. Wow. As far as classic rock is concerned, like 70s arena rock, I think this is the king. There's nothing that beat this at the time. Tom Schultz like invented recording techniques and equipment just to make this album. And I mean, I read that he had these songs ready in the early 70s, but because of how long everything took and how he had to get the money, he was working at the camera store. Really interesting story about this album. Kind of a bummer about what happened with Boston after this because, I think Dave Mustaine said it. You have your whole life to write your first album, but then you have a time limit on the next one. And that's kind of what happened with Boston. Boston isn't really a band. I didn't know this for a long time. Tom Schultz wrote everything. He had input from, Brad Delp a little bit, but with the singing, but that was about it. I mean, Tom Schultz had everything orchestrated, and this is actually orchestrated to a T, I would say. Man, Peace of Mind is just one of the best rock songs of all time. I mean, with everything together, it's just so well put together. Everyone knows More Than a Feeling, but I mean, you put this album on, people will be like, oh yeah, I know that song, and it's every single song. If there's one song I don't really like, it's Take Me Home Tonight. Or Let Me Take Me Home Tonight, but everything else is just so tasteful and just excellently produced. What a phenomenal album. Man, that would be such a killer back-to-back. Altars of Madness, Enter the Wu-Tang, and Boston. I think that maybe I should do that after this video. All right, back to some newer stuff. This is something I picked up recently. Celestial Sanctuary. Kind of there's two. These next two kind of have a theme of the same as Skeletal Remains of death metal that harkens back to that early 90s. I see a lot of Obituary personally on this album, which even the album cover kind of looks like an Obituary album if you ask me. But also Bolt Thrower, very slow. I read some reviews that people thought this was boring. Maybe people are just jaded at this point listening to all of these bands. Metalheads are like that, but I thought this was a killer, just classic death metal album. It actually is a good segue to go into the next one because people also claim this was boring, which I don't know how you would do that. Frozen Soul, Crypt of Ice. Yeah, this album is total bolt thrower, total mortician. I just really like the way it sounds. I know some people are like, oh man, the demo sounded better because it was more grimy, I guess cavernous. People really like cavernous, which again, when we get to Tone Mold, I'll talk more about that. But Frozen Soul, really solid album. This and Celestial Sanctuary, I think could really go together as like companion pieces, as just like, if people want to know about like where a lot of just like bread and butter death metal sounds like these days, it sounds like these bands, which sound like old bands. It's kind of funny how that happens. Okay, let's talk about some classics. Killers, the last Paul Di'Anno Iron Maiden album, and the only Iron Maiden album I own. Although I really should own Power Slave, Number of the Beast, and Peace of Mind. Those three are some of my favorites. Somewhere in Time is also really good. I kind of get lost after Seventh Son. Like Seventh Son is about as progressive as I can go with Maiden, and then in the after Fear in the Dark and when like modern Maiden, Although I hear Senjutsu was good, I just can't get into it. My bandmate really likes Iron Maiden, but I really like Iron Maiden. It's a little bit more punky, and Killers is that. They I hear that Steve Harris said that punk wasn't a big influence on Maiden in the first two albums, which I don't even know how they would say that. But Killers is a killer album. Pardon my pun. I gotta say, like, my favorites on this one, I mean, they're just really good. Yeah, Wrathchild. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, that one's a killer track. All right, let's go on. You know what? Let's do these next two because they kind of go together, and then we're gonna have to make this part 5. Gatecreeper. I said I was gonna bring these guys up later. This is again probably could throw them in with Frozen Soul and Celestial Sanctuary as death metal, that modern death metal that harkens back to a yesteryear kind of mentality. Gatecreeper specifically kind of go more for like the Wolverine blues era Entombed. They even use the same HM2 pedal, which I should have had ready. I actually have one of those. But yeah, Gatecreeper. This is Deserted. Some people thought that this album sounds kind of dry, but I actually think the songwriting's pretty strong on this. I remember the songs from this album better than the first one, Sonarian Desperation or whatever. This album is pretty good as far as the, kind of like Terminal Nation. You take death metal, a little bit of hardcore. It's kind of like if you took Entombed and Power Trip and like smashed them together, you get Gatecreeper, which makes sense. I mean, they're from the Southwest, and that kind of sound is really big right now. I don't have any Power Trip on me, but that Nightmare Logic, I think, had a really profound impact in the metal community, and Gatecreeper was kind of enjoying some of that as well because they kind of get some of that angle. Another band that is somewhat similar, but from a different angle, is Tomb Mold. I don't have the older stuff, the Manor of Infinite Forms or anything like that, but I got Planetary Clairvoyance right now. Tomb Mold's really interesting. I would say they're kind of like doing a similar thing on this album where Blood Incantation was doing with a lot of spacey death metal stuff. I think I finally figured out what carnivorous death metal like was after listening to Tomb Mold, where the vocals are like way in the back and then it echoes through. It's like it's really interesting sound. This is probably Tomb Mold's biggest attempt at creating like songs with structures that are recognizable. Not dissing the older tracks, but I felt like a lot of old Tomb Mold for me kind of like meandered. Maybe like the Bloodborne monsters and their meandering tentacles and teeth that they like to talk about. But yeah, Manor of Infinite Forms. That one's a good one too. But this is Planetary Clairvoyance. Pretty good one. I haven't listened to this one in a while, so maybe I should throw it on. But I remember liking Infinite Resurrection and Accelerative Phenomena. Again, kind of reminds me of Blood Incantation a little bit with the albums there. All right. We're going to stop it there. We're going to go for part 5 in the last part, and then we'll be wrapping up this vinyl collection.